I don't know if there's ever could be enough words for me to describe the appreciation and gratitude I have for AC and what I learned being with him. And it wasn't easy. Our relationship was not easy. Um, but the lessons that we learned, that I learned, the things I took away made me who I am. And we we started on some really heavy, hard stuff. So we ended up getting together for our redo. Okay. And we met almost directly halfway between us in this tiny little town. And he got there at the same time as me, which he wasn't supposed to do. Wasn't supposed to. So we went up to the room and I should have just walked straight past him. Should have walked straight past him to go on with the original plan. But I couldn't. And he kissed me and we fell onto the bed and I don't know what the fuck he did, but he made me orgasm. Like, I don't even know if there's ever been one like that before. I fell off the bed. He was really proud of himself. It was really fucking amazing. And as amazing as all of the sex was that night, because it was phenomenal. Here's what I remember. After the first romp, we went out to eat. I was so nervous to drive in the truck with him. Like I was terrified to drive in the truck with him. And I don't know why, because it wasn't about being scared like if I was safe. It had nothing to do with that. I knew I was safe. It was more like, I want to hold your hand, but should I hold your hand? I don't know if I should hold your hand. Like it was like that kind of weird, right? And we sat down at this little restaurant. It was total dive place, and we did not fit in. It was very clear that we were outsiders. And we sat down in this little booth and we talked about the future and the goals and the dreams and the visions. He described my tour bus to me. And I made some kind of offhanded joke because it freaked me out because it was so spot on. Like it was like he was creeping on my Pinterest boards. The waitress came over to tell us how much she enjoyed having us there because our laughing was contagious because we were laughing so hard. The food was so good. I still remember that. We had like homemade fresh poppers that were wrapped in bacon and they were so good. I remember the laughing. I remember the feeling. I already fell. But we had this agreement, and this agreement was that we weren't going to be something. I remember calling him later on at one point and saying, I know this is what we agreed to, but I need more communication. Because we are unlearning monogamy and I need help with that. Like I don't know how to process that. So if you can't process with me, then I can't do this. And he was like, I can do that with you. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. And we had had a few things that had popped up that showed me the way communication, like why it's so important and the ways in which I was doing it wrong, right? We both had a lot of baggage and we both had a lot of triggers, and both of us were still healing. He taught me how my communication level was so below where I had thought it was. Because I made a lot of assumptions, and I grew to realize that that was how my family did life. There were a lot of decisions that were made for us. It was very normal and standard. There were so many times I would start to answer for him and he'd be like, why are you don't know? And I'm like, oh, you're right. I guess I don't. That was how my family functioned. And I struggled because I wanted more. But at the same time, I didn't know what the fuck I wanted because I didn't want him to move in with me. I didn't want to get married ever again. I didn't want monogamy again. And those were things he did. I remember one night we were at a hotel. He asked me a question about the kids. And I gave him a really snotty response. And it was something along the lines of like, oh, doesn't that go against the rules or something like that? Because we basically had a contract. Like we basically listed out like this is allowed, this is not allowed, this is too like our relationship was a contract. And I remember him turning around and like looking at me and he was like, Deb, what the fuck? I'm like, what? And he's like, as things are gonna change. As we evolve, as we grow together, we are gonna evolve together and the rules are gonna change. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. Because I had never done that before. We became very, very crystal clear on what was allowed and what wasn't allowed, on the table and what was off the table. We would meet and chat on Sundays and say, like, is this still working for you? Is this still working for me? The question was always, is it still working for me? We were so open and honest about what we were working on in our personal growth. I was working on saying what I wanted and not just going along or shying out. I wanted to let him. I came from a world where two people become one person instead of where two people stay two people with full autonomy. And I wanted to learn how to do that. I respected the fuck out of him. I wanted to learn how to show up for him. I wanted to let him be him without being scared. And there was so many things. He wasn't good with his words. But that man, he showed up in his actions. There were things that I wanted to he taught me what healthy was. And by teaching me what healthy was, he inherently taught me what toxic was. I never knew that my family was toxic. But I started realizing things. We started meeting up in Pittsburgh because it was the closest to halfway where there was things to do. And we took each other's request. We took the task of one another's requests very seriously. We found the club and we went. I can't imagine going out with anyone else. And the club became this place of very, very mixed driven emotions for me. I couldn't let go when I was there. I couldn't just be free. I was still worried and ashamed and all of these things. And I didn't know how to work through it. He was the best thing that ever happened to me. When I told my family I was moving to Pittsburgh, I could talk about AC forever. I really could. Um, because I don't know if there's another human that I respect as much as I respect him. Which is hard to say when everybody in your family hates him. I still remember first Easter of 2023, Easter 2023. I had not yet moved to Pittsburgh. Him and I were just talking, but we had met up a couple times, and we were talking at that moment, and I started telling my cousin and my sister-in-law about him. They were so mean. And I know it was all in fun, and I know it's because, over the years I've made a lot of bad judgment calls, and I get that, but months and months later, they still couldn't accept him, and that was a problem. When I had told my family I was moving to Pittsburgh, it didn't go well, to say the least. I mean, that's like an understatement of the century. There was screaming and yelling. And I probably didn't do it in the best of ways. And a lot of my actions were driven by fear. But I also knew it was what I needed to do. My family took the plates off my car. My ex-husband threatened to charge me with kidnapping. My mom told me he was right. They started listing out all the ways I'd never make it because I needed them. And that was the exact reason I needed to go, because I needed to do this on my own. And I needed to be away from the trauma, because there was trauma on every corner. Every corner was another person. I was embarrassed if they found out what I was doing, or I was scared of them. I don't know. I can't even describe it. I just knew I had to go, and I didn't know what to do. I walked back to their house, and there were no plates on the car, and I went upstairs and I started packing clothes. And my kids still weren't home. We were past drop-off time. I didn't know what was going on because nobody would answer their phone. And my brother pulled up. And he was insistent that we needed to talk right then. But I didn't want to, and I couldn't. And I couldn't talk, and I couldn't have a conversation, and I couldn't be nice because I didn't know where the fuck my kids were. And I never had any intention of discussing my move with my brother because it was none of his business. And as I kept saying, I'm not going to talk about this now, and he kept saying, we need to. He went on to tell me some of the most cruel, awful, manipulative things I've ever been told. He shredded me into so many pieces. The next month was really tough. And I'll be honest, I didn't know if my parents and I were going to be able to even salvage any part of our relationship. Nobody had the tools that we needed. We didn't know how to work through it. I didn't know how to tell them what I needed to say. It was really hard. It was really hard. That was the beginning of the implosion. And I talked to my therapist, and she was like, I think you have a good plan. And I thought I had a good plan, but I didn't have specifics. And no matter how I turned around, no matter what I said, they just kept telling me I couldn't do it. And I couldn't take the kids. And I remember her saying over and over to my mom, you don't believe in me. And she said, I hope you do. And I'm like, but you don't believe I can. And she's like, I want you to. And I was like, but you don't believe I can. And she's like, isn't it the same thing? And I said, no. And when they asked why I needed to leave, it was because we have no boundaries. It was because everybody wants everything. Like, they want all these explanations, and I don't owe them to anybody. It was bad. It was really bad. But things lined up, and I got myself down here. I miss him. I miss him more than I should. The lessons that we had, the things I learned, the person I became. I hate that he doesn't get to see it. Sex was such a huge piece of my story for a while. Because I was so scared to talk about it. I was so scared to let people know. But it's also part of my identity. It's part of my authenticity. It's part of who I am. I learned what it looks like when somebody shows up for you. I learned what compromise really is. I learned communication. I learned how to not hold someone else's baggage. I learned that you can still get assaulted even when your person and your safety is right in front of you. I learned that sometimes jealousy and emotions just completely take over. I learned that because somebody doesn't say something doesn't mean that they're not thinking it or that they're not insecure. I learned it's okay to change my mind. I learned that you can disagree and still support me. I learned that sometimes the timing is just really wrong. I learned we don't have to fix each other's problems. I learned that we're all entitled to our own opinions, and they always matter. I learned that being vulnerable, while it's easy for me to do to a huge crowd, is really hard for me to do one-on-one. I learned that the greatest heartache can produce the most beautiful artwork. I learned I was never meant to be a type A person. I learned to be a type A person. I learned who I really was, who I really am. I learned that you can love different people at different levels. I learned that the most successful, impactful, beautiful relationships might not last forever. That doesn't make it a failure. I learned who I really am. And I'm really fucking proud of who I've become.